listening to Enlivening Musings, a podcast to enhance your life so you live fully alive. Sponsored by the Pleasure Fairy app. Download it for more support. Welcome to Enlivening Musings. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're talking shame, perfectionism, all those core wounds that can be running the show and dampening our aliveness.
Yeah. Yep, they're there.
I think they're some of the biggest ones, shame and perfectionism are so prevalent. And I feel like, oh goodness, it's such a huge topic that I really like the fact that we're kind of mixing in the concept of core wounds, because each person has their own core wounds. Like, your level of perfectionism is probably different than mine. It's different than my oldest. It's different than my husband's. It's different, whatever. And I mentioned those two because numerology is interesting to me. And people who are sixes can have an even stronger tendency towards perfectionism. And so, I think about them whenever I think about perfectionism.
And six is also a very spiritual number too. They say I think six is the Christ consciousness.
Okay. Cool.
But it's interesting because I'm curious of how you get people's numerology, because there's so many.
There's so many.
There's so many different, there's your karma, there's your soul path, there's so many, but.
Right. Now this becomes a numerology podcast.
Yeah. It's not. But it is interesting because there's so many different ways you can dig into those core wounds by learning more about yourself, whether it's numerology, astrology, human design, which is kind of our latest thing that we've been just discussing just ourselves within our friendship more and more, and gene keys.
Right.
There's just so many, and that's just a few that I think of off the top of my head.
So something that's interesting about that is Chiron is the wounded healer. And so it deals directly with those core wounds. And so it's going to be retrograde somewhere here. I know here.
That's right.
So crystal plug, September 9th through October 14th, I'm hosting a Dancing into Wholeness thing. And I know that Chiron is retrograde during that time.
Magical.
And it is so magical because I was planning that, and then I saw that, and I'm just like, this is so sweet because we're going to be diving into core wounds. And at the same time that Chiron's retrograde, which makes it a great time to go into your core wounds because it's going a little bit more slowly, and you're able to go into it and actually work with it and play with it. And so I'm just so excited about that. It's Dancing into Wholeness. You can, if you're on my Pleasure Fairy app already, you're going to be alerted to it. I'm super, super, super excited. It's going to be online, so anywhere in the world, but it's going to be huge. And when we talk about things like shame and perfectionism, I mean, that stuff's running the show when we go into a lot of these core wounds of what impacts our sexuality, what impacts our vitality, how we show up, and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think just the idea of knowing that's going to happen, that's good awareness. And then having something in place like this class, some support, some community during that time. So you don't just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm in chaos. What's happening? Or maybe it's a really good healing time for you, and it feels good to just be in community and share that. That's something too. I remember once being in a group or a class, and people were sharing experiences, and I was I just had this moment of why do I have to focus on the bad?
Right.
And I was like, let me share or just focus on a really good experience I had in this realm.
Yes.
It was just this weird shift, but I think about it all the time of how it was and then I just felt so much happier. I don't know. There's so much of focus on suffering.
Right. So that's one of the things that I love about doing this type of stuff too, is because you play with the shadow side of stuff, but then you play with the opposite, the lighter side of it. And you want that, people can get so stuck into just doing all of the shadow stuff, and there's no lightness in there.
Right.
And it gets very serious. And actually at one of my last in-person events, some of the feedback I had gotten was how awesome it was to be around people actually laughing and having fun, because so many women's circles and things can be so serious.
Yeah.
So So that
Yeah.
playfulness has been a priority for me as I've been like bringing some of this in. And I think that's a good thing to share with all of you, is to remember that even if you're in the depths of the seriousness of it all, you can bring some of that lightheartedness, some of that playfulness into the mix, because it doesn't have to be so intense. If you want it to be so intense, and or you're like really getting somewhere with that, there's also nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But if you're wanting to bring some of that in, like that's the invitation to do that. And when you're talking about being in circle like that and having that support, shame is one of those things that loves to be hidden.
Yeah.
It wants to hang out in that shadow. It doesn't want to be seen. And so if you are brave enough to come into a group and come into a circle and share all of that stuff, you are bringing the shame to the light.
Mm-hmm.
And then it doesn't rule the show. It doesn't run that undercurrent anymore, at least not to the degree of being so unconscious and doing these things in the background that you're just like, I can't break this. I don't understand what this is. And it's like that hidden shame that's back there.
Yeah. I mean, that just makes me think of my own situation and how, like that perfection of that comes up because like you have this shame, this story that no one knows about, but you're like trying to prove you're better in a it's so weird in like a weird way, and making sure people will still love you but they don't even know the story, but you're trying to like make up for it, I guess, is the word I'm thinking. And how that can just be a huge theme in life. And I had this conversation again the other day with somebody of just how like, for me it's been a point of like maturity in my spiritual journey is to not just focus on the negative or like the negative traits. And I don't know why that is like a thing. It seems like a lot of people, like even just for instance, like knowing your sun sign, right? So I was like, oh, I'm an Aries. So I would just think of all the bad about that. Like that was my reflex, is to just think of the bad qualities of Aries, like stubborn, like all those different things instead. And the thing that made it really switch for me is so funny. My best friend gave me a coffee mug and it said like Aries, and it was like optimistic, like hardworking, it said, and confident. It had some really just positive words on it. And just that alone really made me start to think like, oh yeah, like there is a lot of good things about me and who I am. Doesn't it sound silly, right? But I think so many of us feel that way.
Well, it's funny for me, and talking about sign differences. I mean, I'm a Gemini, so I'm the best, and so like I never did that.
So funny.
Never ever. People would sit there and like I might get like I got a goofy magnet that said all my negative qualities actually. And so I'd be like, okay, and I put it up on my fridge because it's just like, sure, whatever.
That's funny. And people say that's such a Gemini thing, to just be like really open, and like you can't really it's almost like you can't have an argument with a Gemini because they'd be like, oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, right.
They're just like seeing everything and like, oh, that's so funny.
Well, and then I have a Libra stellium, so I see both sides
my gosh.
and like to balance out both of those components. So
that's so funny.
I love it.
I know. This is what we were just talking about earlier, is how we just feel like, and everyone's like demographics, when they fill something out, they should have like their full birth date and time and location, because I feel like it would allow me to like serve even my own patients and clients better if I knew like their big three and their human design. So I knew how to like approach them, or to know like even just the basics of their makeup, because it's huge of how you can, like me being a projector, like being asked to join in, or what is invited in and things like that. Because you only know yourself. And so you don't know why things aren't going a certain way, or you're not feeling invited, or you're not feeling involved. And then when you realize something about yourself, you're like, oh, okay, well, that's why I feel that way.
Well, and you can accept those things too about yourself and about the other people. And really, it's just spreading more of that appreciation around for our differences and being able to accept and love yourself. And I feel like they're such great tools because when we talk about things like shame, sometimes the things that we feel ashamed of are these things that are unique to us. And you think about being a kid and certain things that maybe you got like put down for or anything. Right now with the realm of human design, I'm thinking about like my youngest. In her design, she's going to be the one who's going to ask for food and drinks and stuff when it's bedtime. Now, granted, there are kids who do that and they do it to like prolong bed and blah, blah, blah. However, it's in her design. Like she's supposed to eat before bed. And if she's thirsty, like she should get up and get a drink of water, even though we've already started bed. So for me as her mom, being able to be like, okay, get yourself to drink water, like versus almost shaming her or, you know what I mean?
Oh
being
my
like,
gosh,
no
yes.
way, you shouldn't be doing that. It's bedtime. It's not time to do that, you know? So all of those things, it's just so great to be able to, especially if there are parents listening, learn your kids' human design so you can understand them and their astrology. And that's something when I was teaching parenting classes, I would teach parents. I'm like, learn your kids' numerology, learn their astrology, learn their human design. And don't put it on them though. You know, don't be like, oh, you're so indecisive because you're a Libra. You know, like don't do that. But you have these tools now to better understand them and accept them and maybe help them with the things that they could tweak or improve upon if that's for their greater good. You know, and then amplifying their strengths and really being able to focus on like what their gifts are. And it's so huge.
Imagine if that's, I mean, and I think that's the future. I really think it is because more and more people are learning these techniques and ways to look at ourselves. And what a beautiful, if we can, that's what I'm saying. If we all knew each other's and loved on it because you're exactly when you said that, sometimes what we feel is not so great, other people love about us, or that's our gift. And I've been experiencing that in this group of people, and they're like, no, don't try to be like us. We want you because you're different. Be that. Do you. Don't. Because I'm like, I don't know how to do what you guys are doing. I'm not sure. And they're like, no, that's why we want you. I keep having to hear it like, no, just bring your own gifts. That's why we want you. And so what a beautiful thing, right? If we can all just really live our gifts versus being shamed for what we're not.
And how much does that help with the perfectionism piece? Because so much of the drive for perfection is to be like other people.
Yeah.
And it's not about just being ourselves and being the best version of ourselves. It's about trying to be perfect per such and such and such guidelines and expectations that have nothing to do with our individual design, our individual map, our individualness,
Wow. I'm having a moment like I usually do during our podcast where it feels like a deep therapy session for both of us.
It's so good. Well, yes. And we amplify one another. So
it is good. And that was fun too when we realized our designs amplify each other. And we're like, that's why we just jive together so good, because that's how we're meant to be.
Right.
So awesome. It makes life so much more fun and playful, which has been, again, one of my whole journeys probably over the last 10 years was trying to remember the joy of being a child. And I would say it with this kind of caveat is if you feel like I didn't have a good childhood. One of my teachers said this, and I think it's so true. And I say all the time that it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Nice.
And you can experience that however you want to feel that. And if it feels triggering in any way, just be with it, because there is a way to go back and heal some of that and find that childlike joy again, which ties into all the things we talk about, pleasure and
innocence, erotic innocence.
Yes, that eros, all of those things.
Yes.
It's so possible. Trust me, I have been there from the point of just feeling like that is a loss for me. And it made me feel very sad that I didn't even know the path to get there.
Yeah.
And there's there's so many ways and so many things that can come in to guide you there. So just set the intention, I guess. As cheesy as it sounds, it's something I guess I realized I did all those years ago.
Yeah.
So
and
10 years, 12 years later, here I am.
And starting with something simple, like
Yeah.
it could be just about enjoying games or something,
Mm-hmm.
like the one thing you could remember, or it could be about focusing on beauty and how that's going to connect you to, as a child, how we could see like the beauty in the rocks and the mud puddles and the, whatever it is, just starting simple,
Yeah.
one step at a time. And all of this, I mean, it's just we've been all over the map with this one, guys. So, so to wrap it up and round it out here, no matter what you're dealing with, if it's like really deep shame, if it's like the lack of childhood, if it's perfectionism, if you're doing stuff with your core wounds, doing your own personal practice, finding anyone who really resonates to support you. And then if you are attracted and vibing with me, then and you're around in September, hop on the Dancing into Wholeness, because it's going to be a good one.
A deep dive into those deep core wounds.
Deep core wounds. This one is going to be, all the core wounds can get into our sexual self, because that's why I do psychosexual embodiment stuff, because that literally means that our sexual self is entwined with our psyche as well as our body and our somatics and everything. That's what that word means. Our sexual self is with us all the time, expressing itself, but it is going to be in that realm. So
I can't wait.
Yay. All right. Enjoy your day and take a deep breath, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. You can find us on Instagram at Enlivening Musings. Connect with Crystal on her app Pleasure Fairy. Connect with Katie on her website wellnesswithkatie.com. Enjoy.